this out. And I believe in your name, oh, miracles can't happen. I believe in your name, oh, miracles can't happen. The blind will see, the sick will stand. Sing hallelujah with confidence. When we can love your mercy waits. Sing hallelujah and live again. When the lies come from every side to say you're done, to say it's over, I remember the 1,000th time enough has won. This is far from over. I believe in your name, miracles can't happen. I believe in your name, miracles can't happen. Yeah. The blind will see, the sick will stand. Sing hallelujah with confidence. When we can love your mercy waits. Sing hallelujah and live again. Everybody awake this morning? Let's sing this out. Oh Jesus, Jesus, your love is breaking chains right now, right now. And Jesus, Jesus, there's hope found in your name right now, right now. Let's get loud this morning. Hey! Oh Jesus, Jesus, your love is breaking chains right now, right now. And nothing can stop you. Jesus, Jesus, there's hope found in your name right now, right now. The blood
like my home, walking this tightrope after your heart.
Independent, I left home to find my way. And there my feet had found the rhythm, my worries seemed to fade. And oh, it battered boots and shallow roots, but nothing held me still. Just scattered pursuits of myself without you's what I want, still part of your will. I lean into all my wants and wishes, I lean into my thoughts and wildest dreams, holding on to all my heart's desires in this reckless pursuit of me. And every single line like casting shadows seem to read these words I often think, holding my own breath till my heart expires. Is this the place I long to reach? In this reckless pursuit of me. As I stand in this still light, and there's a light out in the distance, a voice that carries far. While I'm in awe of the stars, you're in all of my heart, knowing both still shine in the dark. I lean into all my wants and wishes, I lean into my thoughts and wildest dreams, holding on to all my heart's desires in this reckless pursuit of me. And every single light like casting shadows seem to read these words I often think, holding my own breath till my heart expires. It's the place I long to reach in this reckless pursuit of me. this mess. You saw me here within it. The same road I walked is a road you run to welcome me home. space that I made was to measure your grace. Still it stretches out beyond to every fading heart. In the worlds they part, you shine away home again. And as your tears fall, my fears fail, your love still stands to hold. In every doubt, wait against love's embrace, as broken lean into hope. And as your love lives to carry on, the light will shine through every dawn to reach the ones who reach beyond. And learn to lean into morning, Suncoast. Man, what a good morning. I'm just taking it in right now. We have a new song for you, and we've been going over the song in different ways, and we've been looking at the lyrics and feeling it out, and we played it this first service, and it's one of those ones that just kind of call you forward, you know, it calls you out of your element, and the message of this song is a great message to remind ourselves, no matter what you're going through, it's nice to kind of zoom out, take ourselves out of our situation, outside of our circumstance, and take a bigger picture of God's love. And the first line in this song says, it talks about intention, and what did God mean when he wrote this? What about this? And we try so much, and we take things out of, I guess, perspective sometimes. We add in, what did they mean by that? And we can fill in that blank over and over again. And the thing I have realized in relationships is I could take things so wrong sometimes. Getting a text, seeing a letter, like, okay, I read it this way, but what was the intention behind this message? And what that does in a relationship is it calls me to be closer to that relationship, because I want to know the intentions of God. And I feel like a lot of the times we can mess that up. Oh man, but reading this lyrics and going through this song, my mind can go all over the place, but to remind myself that God's intention is to love us, no matter what's going through our lives, what we're dealing with. He is calling us to say, I want you to come closer. I want you to read my intentions, not these words that you could take either way. I want you to look at these words and dive closer to me through them. Know my intentions. So with that, this song is one that just calls people to clap. So I'm gonna encourage you guys to join in with me. Let's do it. So guys so much for singing out with us. Enjoy the service.
Hey Suncoast, y'all really helped a lot of people out last year. Check out some of the highlights of the wonderful things we did in 2022. As a drop-off for Mothers Helping Mothers, we helped sort and deliver 18,000 pounds of donated items. Lifehouse Counseling did 16 subsidized sessions. 1,480 backpacks were donated to Safe Children's Coalition and stuffed with supplies by Suncoast Youth. We supplied some educational materials for a school in Kenya and $850 in supplies for the Haven Art Program for children and adults with exceptionalities. We gave away 15 cars, which makes 165 cars given away today, 2,600 in auto repairs, 235 free oil changes. Suncoast Cares provided 2,829 in utilities, 2,160 in groceries, 775 in gas cards, $662 in miscellaneous needs, and so much more. Y'all are so awesome.
Good job, Suncoast. Welcome. My name's Dr. Troy Doucet. I'm a teaching pastor here at Suncoast. So if you're visiting for the first time, welcome. If you're watching online, thanks for being here. We're in the final week of a series that we have called Relationships. And I think this is one of those series that I think hit home for a lot of people. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been able to speak with literally like dozens of people, single people, married people, who this message, these teachings have really just opened up areas in our life to talk about, to be honest and authentic with. And it's been my privilege to talk with some of you and help in ways that I can by praying for you, by giving advice where I can. And so I'm just so thankful that some of this teaching has been relevant and impactful for your life. If you remember, week 1 was all about loving yourself. How do we learn to love who we are? All of our complexities, intricacies, nuances, the good and the bad. Because what I made the argument was that basically all of my relationships hinge on how healthy I am and how well I'm able to love myself before I can love anything or anyone else. And loving yourself, we found out, was not vanity, it was victory. In week 2, we learned about how do we love God, that being which is the essence and totality of love itself. And we found out that I can begin to love God when I learn to love what God loves. And what does God love? Everything and everyone. And last week we talked a little bit about how do we raise children? How do we have that relationship with our kids and oversee but not overwhelm their development? And some of the things we taught were that kids need our relationship. They don't need to merely inherit our religion. And they need to trust us in order to transform into mature and responsible adults to live out the best life that God has for them. But today, I get to close out this series with a very thought-provoking and probably controversial sermon that I'm calling The Myth of Marriage and Happily Ever After. Now, what do you mean, Troy? Myth of marriage? Isn't a myth something that's not real or not true, like Harry Potter worlds or Lord of the Rings? Well, that's the problem for us here in the West, is that when we hear the word myth, we automatically think not true. When in fact, the original meaning of the word myth, as the psychologist Carl Jung states, is that it's something that is always true. He says this: myths do not attempt to explain reality. They attempt to let the reader experience reality because it's going to reveal what is both true and untrue in our world. So I want to crank today's sermon up by giving you 3 big marriage myths. So you may want to buckle up and listen intently to what I'm going to say. 3 marriage myths that have been sort of constructed socially, religiously, and so forth and so on. So I wanted to dispel these right away. The first one is this: marriage was created and instituted by God. Maybe. If you believe God created everything, then of course marriage would fall into that, but God also made things like angels that fell and things like that. But for thousands of years, we know this, that cultural anthropologists know that humans were loosely based organized groups of about 30 people. They had several male leaders early on in our evolution, and these male leaders would often share the same females, and so there was no way of knowing when an offspring was born whose it was. And so society, as we grow and mature and become more rational, we need to be a little bit more civilized, a little bit more organized. And this is what we know with absolute fact, that the first recorded evidence of any marriage ceremony does not take place until 2350 BC in Mesopotamia. And it is from that marriage becomes a widespread institution that is then embraced by the Jews and the Hebrews, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans. It had nothing to do with religious faith or religious sacraments. It was a societal arrangement that evolved over centuries into a religious ceremony. And again, we know this because it's not until the Council of Trent in 1563 where the church, the Catholic Church, who had the penultimum of power at that time, made marriage a sacrament of the church, and it had to be overseen by a priest in order for it to be legally legitimate. That's not until 1563, modern era. How many of you guys had a priest or a pastor oversee your church, your marriage? Yeah, me too. This is what we do, but that's a really, really new phenomenon. Here's myth number 2. Marriage has always been about true love. Not really. Marriage's purpose, from what we know, was the moment in which a woman became the possession of a man, his property. And this was to ensure that any heirs of birth were his. Even in ancient Greece, we know during the wedding ceremony, a father, this is where we get the idea where the woman is walked down the aisle with her father. You guys have seen this, and the priest will say, "Who gives this woman away?" Right? And that comes from the Greeks, not from the Hebrews, right? It comes from the Greeks. Because if you read the Hebrew text, it says a man is leaving his father and mother. But the Greeks did it reverse, right? And the father would say, "I offer my daughter to you for the purpose of producing legitimate offspring." That was the father's confession in the ceremony. Hopefully none of you guys said that when your daughters were given in marriage. And among the ancient Hebrews, men were free to take actually several wives if they wanted. And then it evolved to the Greeks and Romans where they not only could marry a wife, they could have concubines and other sorts of companions. And in fact, in Greek and Roman culture, if a woman was unable to conceive children, the men were able to give her back to her family without any questions asked, and he could marry someone else who could give him children. Talk about true love right there, right? Some of you are looking at me like, "I don't like this sermon." It's all right. We humans, we're not all we're cracked up to be at times, right? And then the last one, here's the one I got in trouble for last service. There is a such thing as a biblical traditional marriage. Not necessarily. Let me give you some biblical traditional marriages for you to kind of go look up if you want. In Genesis 38, here's what it says. That if a woman's husband dies and she has no children, she is to take his brother as her husband. How many of you guys really love your brother-in-law? Ladies, anybody? You better if you were in this culture. Because if your husband died, no questions asked. Moses says this is a command of God. What a traditional marriage. Well, here's another biblical marriage for you guys to think about. When the Israeli army would invade like sort of the Philistines or whatever, Moses commanded in Numbers 31 and Deuteronomy 21, kill the men, the women and their children, but you can take the virgins of that culture for your wives. Not as concubines, or you take them for your wives. Imagine being a woman in that culture where this invading army has just killed everything you love and hold dear, and now you are forced into betrothal with the man who possibly murdered your former husband. That's a biblical marriage. I didn't write the book, y'all. I just read it. And here's the last one. In Deuteronomy 22, if a woman is raped by a man, she was to become his wife. Biblical marriage. Which one? Which one is it? Oh, but Troy, the New Testament where Paul writes about how women should submit to their husbands and the husband should love Jesus as he loves the church. Great. Let me give you the cultural context of that. That was a Jewish man and a Jewish woman. It never meant anyone you loved, anyone you wanted to be with. That was restricted to only Jewish people. So even the contextual truth of that verse in the New Testament is not even valid for us today. So what do? Well, Troy, do you believe the Bible? I get accused of that all the time. Of course I believe the Bible. I believe the Bible is still a really good guide for relationships if you know where and how to look for it and how to read it for all it's worth. So let me give you what I think is a great verse. All of you may have heard this in some wedding ceremony before. It comes from Paul's writing in 1 Corinthians. Here's what he says. If I could speak all the languages of earth and of angels, but didn't love others, I would be like a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I had the gift of prophecy, so like knowledge, and if I understood all of God's secret plans and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that it could move mountains, but if I didn't love others, I would be what? Nothing. If I gave everything I had to the poor, even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not jealous or boastful or proud or rude. Love doesn't demand its own way of thinking. It's not irritable, and it keeps no record of being wronged. It doesn't rejoice about injustice, but rejoices whenever truth wins out. Love never gives up. It never loses faith. It's always hopeful, and it endures through every circumstance. Prophecy and speaking in unknown languages and special knowledge will become useless, but love will last forever. Now, our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. Why? Because when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned like one. But when I grew up, I put away my childish thoughts, even about love and marriage. Now, when we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror, but in time we will see everything with perfect clarity. And I know now, and what I know now is partial and incomplete, but in time I will know everything completely, just as God knows me completely. And here's the big one. 3 things last forever. You ready? Marriage, religion, and your belief about both. Wrong. What lasts forever? Faith, hope, love, and the greatest is love. Now, I'm not talking about some hoity-toity pie-in-the-sky understanding of love. I'm talking about a process of love that withstands the test of time, that will endure tests and trials and tribulations in your life. I'm talking about real love, true love. So let me give you some points from that text. Point number 1 is this. Marriage is never the goal of a relationship. Love is. Notice what Paul writes to the Corinthian church. Notice what he says. Faith is important, but faith is always like object-oriented. I put my faith in something or someone. Like, how many of you guys checked your chair before you sat down to make sure it was screwed in right, so you didn't break on you, you crack your tailbone? How many of you guys sat in your chair, just had faith in the chair? You sat in it, right? You put that faith in there, that's a trust. And that trust is based on previous experience. Maybe most of you sit in the same spot each Sunday and you're like, hey, I sat here before, the chair didn't break. Boom, I trust the chair. Some of you guys trust your husband, your wives, or whatever, your significant others when they go to work, right? Because they come back home at night. Trust is always important, and that's what faith really is. It's based on previous experience. Why do I have faith in God? Because he's never let me down in the past. And that builds my faith and trust in who he is. And then he says hope is really important as well. Hope is thinking in the context of relationships about a secured future. While faith is object-oriented, hope is future-oriented. It's not just trust, but it's having like this confidence. I know that this is going to work out. That's hope. But then he says, what is the greatest of all? Love. Love is supreme. Why? Because God is love. I love what William Barclay, the great interpreter of the scripture, he says this: faith without love can become cold. Hope without love can become grim. Love is the fire which kindles our faith and then gives light that turns hope into certainty. Love is the goal of every relationship, whether it's romantic, whether it's I'm trying to rear children, whether it's in friendship. I want to love the other person. Now, we're talking about in the context of marriage and romantic relationships today, and that is the goal of your relationship. Whether you're married now or single and looking, whatever the case may be, that certificate you sign on your wedding day, as legal as it is, as binding as it is, as holy as it is, as sacred as it is to you, is not what's going to make your marriage. Love is what's going to make it and secure it. That's the point. Point number 2 is real love is a process that is fragile, not just a promise that is fleeting. The process of love is really a process of learning to love. I like how Paul frames it in that verse from Corinthians. He says, everything I know and learn now is incomplete, but in time, as I continue to learn, just as God knows me because God created me, just as I continue to learn everything, I'm going to know myself. I'm going to learn about myself. And learning who you are is a movement towards loving who you are and then loving others in the way that is right. So I like this word learn, right? Learn, I'm an educator. The word education comes from 2 Latin words, educare. It literally means to care for yourself. Education's not just about stacking up degrees. It's about caring for yourself so that I can know myself. Because when I learn myself, I can love myself. And I see my strengths, and I love those. But I can also look at my weaknesses and come to go, I love those things too about me. And if I can love both my strengths and weaknesses in my own life, I can look at your life and go, hey, my wife, she has a lot of strengths. I love those about her. And guess what? Some of you have strengths that I don't have. And if it's love I'm after, then I can look at someone who's maybe a better speaker than me, a better theologian than me, a better thinker than me, whatever. And I could see their strength and not be jealous. Because what did Paul say? Love is not jealous. But I can also look at that person and go, they have weaknesses. And I could love those things too. That's why I love my wife. She sees my weaknesses, and guess what? She still loves me. And she goes, and like Paul wrote, I can look at your weaknesses and go, they don't irritate me. I can look at your weaknesses and not hold them against you, right? I know what some of your weaknesses are, like driving on the road sometimes, right? That gets really, really irritating. The idea here is I need to learn so that I can love both the strength and the weakness. And that's a fragile, fragile process. Because in the end, the process of learning to love is the process of preparing to love others the way God does. And lastly, real love will resist any restriction placed upon it. That's the power of love. Any attempt I try to restrict love, if it's real, it's going to overcome those restrictions. Think of the ways in which we have come to think about love against what Paul just wrote. Paul says, love does not demand its own way of thinking. You know what that means? I don't care what restrictions you place upon love. If it's real love, it is going to overcome those restrictions. Think about history. When people would say, you can't love that person. They're not the same race as you. I grew up in South Louisiana. Not the best place for racial relations back then. I remember I had a cousin. She was dating a guy who was African-American man. Fell in love. Went to their wedding. It was beautiful. I had family members who refused to go to the wedding because she was marrying a black dude. But their love overcame any restriction. It resisted those restrictions. But what about the other things we say? Oh, you can't marry. They're not the same religion as you, honey. Can't marry that guy. Can't love that guy. They're not the same ethnicity as you. Well, you can't love them. They're the same sex as you. Like over time, humans have just tried to restrict love, and true love has resisted it. And I often ask my philosophy students when we talk about like cultural issues or cultural philosophy, like you can't use religion. You can't use a religious text or a holy book. But give me like one rational reason why, say, same-sex relationships are wrong. Like can't use the Bible, can't use God, whatever. And it's often just two things that I hear rationally. Oh, it's not natural, right? It's supposed to be a man and a woman. Not natural. And I go, are these natural? Or did God want me blind? And when I put these on, it frustrates him. You're not doing, right? How many guys had braces growing up? Yeah, did they just grow on your teeth? Or did you need your grill fixed? Right, so there are many things that aren't quote unquote natural, but we don't call them what? Sinful. So truth wins, whether you want to resist it or not, right? Or what about like procreation? Like procreation is the other one, same-sex relationships can't procreate. Well, my wife, as beautiful as she is heterosexual. And guess what? She can't have children. So what do I say to her? Since you can't procreate, baby, you should be alone the rest of your life. How freaking awful is that? We're a hospital, not a courtroom. But if we want to go to trial, I know the arguments. Real love resists any restriction placed upon it. That's the truth. But is the Bible a good guide for relationships today? Absolutely. If you know where to look, if you know how to look for it. And right smack dab in the middle of the Bible, there's this beautiful book. It's called the Song of Songs, right in the middle. And it's so erotic, like it's so explicit. Young Jewish boys were not even allowed to read it until they became men. It's awesome. And it's this illustration of the nature of a love between two people. The joy, the struggle, the heartache. And it's almost as though love has its own life in this book. The writer says several times, multiple times, this is what the writer says. She says, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. It's like she's saying, whatever this thing love is in our relationship, it's too beautiful, it's too precious, it's too significant for us to screw it up. We cannot mess it up. That's what love is. But yet in English, right, remember, Song of Songs was written in Hebrew, but we get so much mileage out of this old, tired, and worn out word, love, right? When I think of the word love, I see my Jeep tires, right? Like I'm on my last treads. We say in the same breath, I love my new pants and my new Jordans, and I love my wife. Wait, what? I love my wife and I love tacos? What are we talking about? But yet the Hebrew language, unlike the English language, gives us three progressive words for love. Three beautiful words that cohesively bring together the full picture of love, that eliminates any ambiguity of I love my wife and tacos in the same sentiment. And I want us to think about these words, not just as words or language, but like as flames, right? As passionate flames. The first word in Hebrew is this word, raya. Let me hear you say it. Say raya. Raya. It's almost like a karate chop, right? Raya is this friendship. It's when you begin to hang out with this person. We actually get our English word soulmate from this word. And this is when we begin to say things about the person that we're falling for. We begin to say things like, oh, she's my best friend. I could tell him anything. And what we see is that the core of love is a friendship. That is the base requirement, is a friendship. But then the raya flame begins to burn into what we call ahava. Let me hear you say that. Say ahava. Ahava. Ahava is that commitment, this deep affectionate love, the sense of desiring to be with someone so much that your heart aches and your mind and your heart can think of little else other than the person that you love. I remember when Esty and I were dating, and we had gone on this date, and she was cool. She thought I was cool. She was beautiful. She thought I was really handsome. And so we're like, hey, let's go on another date. We started dating to kind of see if we had some ahava to go with our raya, like a good jambalaya of love, But I remember this moment when she said, I kind of felt comfortable. I said, I want you to meet my children. And she was like, oh, okay. It's like a big moment. And we went to a dog park. And I'll never forget, we go to this dog park. And there's Esty and her little dog, Diesel. He's a little min pin who's now my adopted child too, right? And I remember my kids running and hugging Esty and playing with Diesel. And they're just having fun at this dog park. And I remember sitting back and going, there's nowhere else in the universe I would rather be than right here, right now with her. Ahava is powerful. In the Song of Songs, it says this: many rivers cannot stop ahava. Ahava is as strong as death. It's when I make the choice to connect my life and join it with someone else's. Ahava is that commitment. But then there's a third word for love. It's this word called dode. It's easy to say, dode. Dode is that intimate sexual part of a relationship. It can be translated as to arouse or to fondle. You get the idea, right? The writer of Song of Songs says, let him kiss me with his mouth, for his dode is better than wine. But dode is way more profound than just sexual pleasure. It's literally the mingling of your souls together. It's as if God regards sex as not just a physical act, but a spiritual one as well. And it was seen as something that was so powerful that it was meant to endure forever. But here's what I want to do. I want to show you guys something. I want you to think again of these different types of love as flames. So here's my raya flame, right? I light my raya flame, and man, I'm starting to like this person. I'm really into her. She's a friend. I'm starting to tell her things, share my life, and I'm like, man, let's see if my raya can add some ahava, and then we light that commitment, right? And now I have the flame of ahava. I'm wanting to spend the rest of my life with this person. But think about how we screw this up as humans. Think about like what an affair is, right? When a person has an affair, it's like they want that dode flame, and they're trying to get all the heat of a relationship from one flame, but there's no commitment, there's no ahava, and there's really no real friendship there. There's no raya. Or what about people who've been married for like 40 years? Maybe there's still a lot of ahava, there's a lot of commitment there. You're in it, you've been in it this long, but maybe there's not a lot of raya left, like a lot of friendship. There's not many date nights, right? It's just sort of going through the same routine, and there's very little dode. Like, this is the problem. This is how fragile love is. But when my raya lights my ahava, friendship, commitment, and then, man, I come together and I go, what about dode? Let me light this middle dode candle, and then boom. And it takes all three candles of flames of passion and love and friendship and commitment burning together. That's what endures time. That's what endures trials. That's what endures tribulations. It is the power of all three flames burning together which give my relationship meaning, significance, and longevity. Not any legal document I sign. I tell people all the time that I'm able to officiate weddings. This document will not make your marriage. Your love will. And we need all three. I think the Bible is the most beautiful, eloquent book that gives us a true picture of real love for longevity. Let me pray for you, Suncoast. God, I pray for my friends. Pray for my community. God, let us not get stuck on traditions or cultural conditioning, but God, let us remember the true nature of any relationship. The heart of it is love, a love that is full, a love that is meaningful, a love that is committed, a love that is intimate. So may the God of the universe who created all of us, who is love itself, awaken us to the truth of that within us. It's in Christ's name I pray, amen. Stand with me, Suncoast. I want to tell you a quick story and then let you guys go. Tom Anderson was a nationally syndicated newspaper columnist, very famous, very wealthy man. He and his wife were married for about 30 years, and they were finally empty nesters. But like many people who have been married that long, there wasn't a whole lot of passion or friendship. It was just going through the cycle of life. And their marriage was in decline. Tom talked about this on a podcast where he felt like him and his wife were going to have to divorce, just to restart, to get a new start, a new life, new relationship. But he decided to give it one last chance. He said, hey, honey, let's go on a vacation. We'll take a week vacation. We'll go to the beach. So they jumped in the car and they drove, and she fell asleep during the ride. And he said he was scanning his channels and he heard this preacher come on. Typically, he didn't listen to religious services, but he decided to listen to this preacher because it was very different. This preacher was talking about just rekindling romance, not quoting a bunch of scriptures at him, not trying to like dictate how to live his life or how to conduct his marriage, just saying, man, just try something new. Try something new. And he kind of convicted Tom. And so they got to the beach house, and as they unpacked, he looked at his wife and he said, hey, would you like to go for a walk with me on the beach? And she was like, okay. He did that. That night, he's like, hey, I'd love to cook a meal for you. She was like, okay. And that entire week, he talked about how he talked and had conversations with his wife about things he normally didn't talk about. He did things for her that he had typically not done. And he said, yeah, it was a little uncomfortable, it was a little hard, but it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. And it carried on weeks even after they got home from their vacation. He continued to just talk with her, serve her, love her. One day he got home from work, he said on the podcast, and he says he walked into his bedroom, and his wife was sitting at the end of the bed, looking down at the floor, despondent and just crying. And he said, honey, is everything okay? And she goes, why are you acting so weird? And he goes, what do you mean, honey? She goes, remember when I went for my physical checkup right before we left to go to vacation? He goes, yeah, I remember you went to the doctor. And she goes, did he tell you something that he didn't tell me? Tom's like, what do you mean, sweetie? She goes, you've been acting really strange these last few weeks. Am I dying, Tom? Tom said, I looked at my wife and said, no, honey, you're not dying. I'm just figuring out how to live again. My prayer for you, friends, is go out there. God offers you to be new again. Even your relationships that you've been in for years can be new again, and start today. He loves you. So do I. God bless you, Suncoast.